The old man's eye tormented me, his pale blue eye, cloudy and veiled with a cataract that gave it the appearance of a vulture's eye. It was an eye that seemed to pierce through my very soul, filling me with dread and unease every time it fell upon me. I knew not why, but I had become obsessed with the thought of ridding myself of that accursed eye forever. My mind was gripped by a madness that urged me to commit a dreadful act, an act that would silence that eye once and for all. Every night for 7 long nights, I stood outside the old man's chamber door, watching him as he slept, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. On the 8th night, my heart raced with anticipation, and a cold sweat trickled down my forehead as I prepared to put my wicked plan into action. The old man slept soundly, his breathing slow and steady. The hour was late, and the darkness of the room was broken only by the faint glow of a single ray of moonlight that fell upon the accursed eye. It was a signal, a sign from the heavens that the time had come for me to act. With stealth and precision, I eased open the door, my heart pounding in my chest. My hand trembled as I held a dim lantern that cast an eerie glow upon the room. I moved closer to the old man's bed, my gaze fixed on the pale blue eye that haunted my every waking moment. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Should I turn back? Should I abandon this madness? But the obsession held me fast in its grip, and I could not resist the impulse that drove me forward. I could hear the old man's heart beating, slow and steady, like the ticking of a clock. But it was not the old man's heart that vexed me. It was my own. The sound of my heart pounded in my ears, drowning out all rational thought. The fear of being discovered intensified my madness, and I could feel the thin thread that held my sanity together beginning to unravel. I clutched the lantern tightly, its light flickering like a dying flame. With each passing second, the heartbeat grew louder, echoing in the hollow chamber of my mind. My breath quickened, matching the rhythm of the old man's heart, and I felt as though I would suffocate under the weight of my own guilt. And then, with a sudden burst of resolve, I sprang forward, the lantern casting a wild and distorted shadow on the walls. The old man awoke, startled and confused, his clouded eye fixed on my face. In that moment, I saw my own reflection in that pale blue eye, my own madness staring back at me. I could delay no longer. I could not endure the torment of that eye any longer. With a cry that was half a sob, half a triumphant yell, I leaped upon the old man, smothering him with the heavy bedcovers. His feeble struggles were no match for my frenzied strength, and soon the old man lay still and silent beneath me. The deed was done. The eye was gone, and my torment should have ended. But instead, the sound of the old man's heartbeat grew louder and louder, drowning out all other noise until it filled the room like a maddening drumbeat. I stumbled backward, my body trembling with horror and guilt. The lantern slipped from my grasp, plunging the room into darkness. But the heartbeat persisted, throbbing in my ears like a relentless metronome. In a desperate attempt to escape the torment, I fled from the room, down the stairs, and out into the cold night air. But the heartbeat followed me, a haunting echo of my madness that refused to be silenced. As I roamed the darkened streets, my mind became a whirlwind of confusion and terror. The relentless beat of the old man's heart pursued me, driving me to the brink of insanity. I wanted to confess my crime, to scream out my guilt to the heavens, but I knew that I could not. The world would never understand the madness that had consumed me. In the days that followed, I tried to live as if nothing had happened, to hide the guilt that gnawed at my soul. But the heartbeat persisted, a haunting reminder of the terrible act I had committed. I could no longer bear the weight of my conscience, and so, in a desperate bid to silence the torment, I revealed my crime to the authorities. As they led me away in chains, I could still hear the sound of the old man's heartbeat, echoing in the depths of my mind. The confession had not brought me peace. It had only amplified the madness that consumed me. And so, as I write these final words from my dark and solitary cell, I can still hear the relentless beat of the old man's heart. It haunts my every waking moment, a constant reminder of the madness that drove me to commit a dreadful act. My fate is sealed, and soon I shall meet my end. But even in death, I fear that the sound of that heartbeat will never fade, that it will continue to torment me for all eternity, a heartbeat of madness that will forever echo in the depths of my soul. The small town of Blackwood held an air of familiarity that could only be found in close-knit communities. Houses with white picket fences lined the streets, and neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles. But beneath this veneer of camaraderie lurked a chilling tradition, one that I had known since my childhood: the annual lottery. As a child, the lottery was a day of excitement and anticipation. I would watch the adults gather in the town square, chatting and laughing as they waited for the proceedings to begin. My parents, like everyone else, participated with an air of solemnity, as if they were partaking in a sacred ritual. Back then, I didn't understand the significance of the lottery, but as I grew older, I began to sense an undercurrent of unease surrounding the event. As the years passed, my perception of the lottery changed. I started to question the purpose of this macabre tradition, but no one would speak openly about it. The elders of the town, with their knowing glances, warned me to remain silent and accept the lottery as a necessary part of our lives. The day of the lottery was always sweltering, the sun beating down mercilessly on the assembled townsfolk. The black box, old and worn, sat atop a wooden stool at the center of the square. It was a relic of the past, passed down from one generation to the next, carrying with it the weight of an unfathomable history. As the time drew near, the jovial atmosphere dissipated, replaced by a palpable tension that hung in the air. The villagers hushed, and a heavy silence enveloped the square. I stood with my heart pounding in my chest, my eyes darting between the black box and the faces of my fellow townspeople. Mr. Summers, the jovial and rotund man who officiated the lottery, stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of the crowd. He exchanged pleasantries with a few of the townsfolk, a contrast to the gravity of the occasion. With an air of casualness, he began to prepare for the lottery, taking slips of paper from the box. My hands trembled as I clutched my slip of paper tightly, praying silently that it wouldn't bear the black spot that signaled my selection. A small part of me wished that someone else's name would be drawn, but the larger part felt a sense of guilt for harboring such thoughts. The moment of truth arrived, the time to reveal the chosen one. Mr. Summers unfolded the slip of paper in his hand and held it up for all to see. The crowd gasped, and my heart sank as I saw the dreaded black spot. It was my name, and I was the chosen one. A whirlwind of emotion swept through me: fear, disbelief, anger. How could this be happening? How could the town I loved and trusted subject one of its own to such a fate? I wanted to scream, to protest, but the weight of tradition and the collective will of the town silenced me. As I walked forward to join Mr. Summers at the front, I felt the accusing eyes of the townsfolk upon me. Their expressions were a mix of pity and relief, as if they were glad that it was not their name that had been drawn. The lottery proceeded with mechanical efficiency. The stones were gathered, and the townsfolk formed a circle around me. I felt like a sacrificial lamb, condemned by a ritual I could neither understand nor escape. Mrs. Dunbar handed me a small stone, her face contorted with grief. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. I nodded, unable to find words to convey the depth of my emotions. Mr. Summers, his voice cracking slightly, instructed the townspeople to begin. The stones flew and I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable. I felt the sharp sting of the first stone against my shoulder, followed by a chorus of blows that rained down upon me. The pain was excruciating, but my mind was numb. I thought of my family, my friends, and the life I would leave behind. I thought of all the other chosen ones before me and wondered how they had felt in their final moments. The barrage of stones continued until I could no longer bear it. Darkness closed in around me, and I felt myself slipping away. In those last moments, I clung to a single thought: that the lottery would one day end, that the townspeople would awaken from their trance and see the horror of what they had been doing. But as the world faded to black, I knew that the lottery would endure, an unyielding force that bound the town in darkness and cruelty. The lottery would persist, and I would become another nameless victim of its savage tradition. I have always been drawn to mysteries, the allure of the unknown, the enigma that lies just beyond the grasp of understanding. And so, when the opportunity arose to visit Hill House, a place steeped in legend and whispered tales. I could not resist the temptation to delve into its secrets. The moment I set foot on the grounds of Hill House, a shiver ran down my spine. The old mansion loomed before me, its dark facade and imposing architecture a testament to the secrets it held within. Its walls seemed to pulse with a hidden energy, as if the very house was alive with a malevolent presence. I was not alone in my quest for answers. Dr. John Montague, a scholar of the supernatural, had invited me and a small group of individuals to partake in a scientific investigation of Hill House. Eleanor Vance, a timid and reserved woman, and Theodora, a vivacious artist with a flair for the dramatic, were to be my companions on this haunting journey. As we settled into our rooms, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The atmosphere was charged with an electricity that crackled in the air. The house seemed to watch us, its ancient eyes peering into our souls with an unnerving intensity. From the very first night the haunting began, strange noises echoed through the corridors, whispers in the darkness, footsteps that did not belong to any living being, an inexplicable banging and knocking. Eleanor in particular seemed to be the target of these eerie occurrences. The haunting seemed to be drawn to her, clinging to her like a shadow. As the days passed, the intensity of the haunting grew. Doors slammed shut on their own, objects moved as if by invisible hands, and chilling drafts swept through the rooms. Theodora, always the skeptic, tried to dismiss these occurrences as mere tricks of the mind, but even she could not deny the palpable sense of fear that enveloped us. We turned to Dr. Montague for answers, but even he was at a loss to explain the inexplicable. His scientific methods and logical reasoning seemed to falter in the face of the supernatural forces at play within Hill House. As the haunting intensified, so did the unraveling of our minds. The house seemed to prey upon our fears and insecurities, feeding off our vulnerability like a malevolent predator. It was as if the very essence of Hill House seeped into our souls, leaving us tormented and haunted by our own demons. Eleanor in particular was affected deeply by the haunting. Her fragile psyche seemed to be on the verge of collapse, and she found solace only in the companionship of the house itself. She became convinced that Hill House was calling to her, beckoning her to join its dark and twisted embrace. I, too, felt the pull of Hill House, the temptation to surrender to its darkness and become one with its secrets. The line between reality and illusion blurred, and I could no longer trust my own perceptions. The house seemed to play with our minds, toying with our fears and desires, until we were no longer sure of what was real and what was imagined. In the depths of the night, as the haunting reached its peak, we were confronted with the full force of Hill House's malevolence. The walls seemed to close in around us, the air thick with an oppressive weight. Eleanor, in a state of delirium, uttered words that sent chills down our spines, a chilling confession that she had come home to Hill House. And then, in a moment of pure terror, the house itself seemed to rebel against our presence. The walls trembled, the floor shook, and the very foundation of Hill House seemed to groan with rage. We fled from the mansion, our hearts pounding in our chests, leaving behind the haunting that had consumed us. As we stood outside, bathed in the light of the rising sun, we knew that Hill House was a place forever tainted by darkness. It was a house that had witnessed untold horrors, a house that had claimed the souls of its unfortunate inhabitants. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of our experiences at Hill House, but the memories remained elusive, like ghosts haunting the corners of our minds. We had escaped the clutches of Hill House, but we would never be the same again. The haunting had left an indelible mark upon our souls, a haunting echo of fear and madness that would linger with us for the rest of our lives.